Hello and welcome to Deep BJ at Lunch, tackling the news head on. This is our first episode of the spin off of BJ at Lunch. I am joined with Blaze today.
Hello, James. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. So today like every week on Deep BJ, we will be tackling a single issue for a whole hour, doing a deep dive into the different causes, what's been happening, and where we're going on different issues. Today, in particular, we will be discussing the rise of the far right in Europe. Starting off with how did we get here? We're going to go through a few topics, but Blaze, do you want to start off? How did we get here?
Yeah, I would love to start off how did we get here, and it's actually, I just want to say that we are trying to wrap it up within an hour, but the topic is so huge that we could talk for 10.
We could.
And maybe 100 hours.
Could be a whole series.
Yeah, so guys, if you will have any observations, any tips, please help us out, the same as you help us with the BJ at Lunch, because that would be precious to actually hear more from you. How do you think we are really tackling this news altogether? But to not sort of go for too long, let me start off with how did we get here, and I'm going to start with something which right now you can hear a lot. And I just want to say that this is not necessarily our opinion. These are just facts. How people who are euro-skeptics right now, mostly right-wing, well, only right-wing, how they are seeing this. And one of the things which you can hear the most nowadays is that Europe is sucking the money from its members. I'm like, not Europe, European Union. But it's not really helping them. And I think that started with the flag example, which was Greece. We have to understand that Greece, nowadays we understand and we consider Greece for years and years and years as the country which is, you know, in a very difficult position, especially financially, has bankrupted long time ago. The way of living, the level of living there is lower than in some of the Eastern European countries, like Poland or Slovenia is getting to that level as well. And why? Because if we're going to look back in history, when Greece joined the EU in 1981, their economic situation was sound. It was absolutely banging. They had a ratio, the debt to GDP was less than 60%, which is respectable, which is okay, you know. And then the budget deficit was below 3%, which is all good. While right now, right now is 160%, but in 2011 it was 180%. And how did that happen? It happened in a way that when they join EU, they accepted euro as one of the first things, okay? And their previous currency wasn't very respectable by the big international banks which are giving the loans to the countries, because the currency was very low, not very strong, and because they are a fairly small country, we're talking about 12 million people living there. The power from them to take money to invest was not as strong. Once they hit the European Union, they decided, okay, our currency is right now really strong. We're going to ask for all these debts, and guess what? European Union gave the mandate to all the banks, saying, absolutely, you can invest in them, you can give them, because right now we're backing them up. Now, if you're going to go to Greece right now, you won't see. You won't hear from locals that EU is really backing them up. And I've been to Greece recently, and I've been talking to these people, but you can also hear it from wider spectrum, that a lot of them are saying, hell, European Union is not the best for us. And they are, on one hand, they're quite skeptical about the immigration, which is coming massively through the country, which we're going to touch later on during today's show. But on the other hand, they are kind of very much identifying with the same issues with which immigrants are wrestling with, which is the lack of care from European Union. So then they started to take in debts, right? They started to buy a lot of things, lands, houses. When you're going to ask average Greek person how it is right now, they're going to tell you, well, we have the flat in Athens or other big city on the mainland. We have the house on the island. We have 3 cars, but no cash in our pockets. And this is coming from the fact that they were spending money which they didn't really have, life on debt. And then when the crisis came, all these valuable things they bought, of course, they still have value because we know that land is hardly going under the, it's not degrading in price. But then it stopped, the value of that stopped raising like in another European country. So actually they were losing money if you think about it, even though they invested it. On top of it, the problem which happened, and I think this is the biggest problem which other countries have and Eurosceptics have. It's not that they bankrupted, because that happens, but there was no safety measure prepared for that. Because when that happened, European Union said, well, we are this brotherhood, we are this, we're comrades, we're on this ship together, but you're on this ship together only if you are spending our money, you are giving us your land for us to buy a land there or do the trade or cross the border without a passport. But when you're actually drowning, sorry, but it's your fault and you're there on your own. And suddenly we are seeing the country which was considered a Western European wealthy country, which I just want to remind hasn't been behind a curtain like all the east part of the continent, and suddenly facing terrible situation, and it's going to take them. They're coming back right now, but it's going to take them next decade or more. But it's not the only country, and I wanted to say that the big factor was to joining the Eurozone. But it's not the only country which did that, did it, James?
No, it isn't. But I think you pointed out a very good point there, because when talking about Europe, the view that it's had, it is this alliance, whether it's economic, cultural, but also it is to sort of help each other out. Like, the euro exists so that if one country falls in debt, in whether it's interest or deficit, it affects all of Europe. So when it came to Greece, when Greece was basically bringing down, if we wanted to be very dry about this, Greece was bringing down the quality, the value of the euro. No one really stepped in from the EU to help them out, which is, I guess, in the context of the rise of the far right, which is the topic in hand, it's part of that anti-globalization, that skepticism towards the institutions, whether it is banks, European Union, or even the country itself that is not doing its job properly. Would that be fair to say?
Well, that'd be definitely fair to say, because it's like, we are on this together only if it's going good. It has to backfire at you at some point, because when it was a Greece on its own, a lot of countries just swallow it. And, the narrative was like, oh, it's aftermath of crisis. We couldn't do anything about it. They were not smart enough to spend money more carefully. Yes, of course. But why, if you are legitimizing this sort of behavior, living on this debt, almost American lifestyle, you would say, why you're not having a safety fuse for it, because on one hand you're saying, hey, we're going to give that big social policy in place, we're going to help you, every country is like a citizen, we're going to help you, you have this healthcare coming from the big budget of all the countries chipping in, so in theory we are all chipping in small part, but when someone needs help you're getting help from big budget. In practice, when it came to sharing this money, didn't work that well. I think for those who don't know, James here has Italian roots.
Have you not seen my hands already waving about all over the place?
Oh, I can feel they're still coming.
Oh yes, I'm just scared of the cameras, and I'm not gonna knock them out. Speaking of Italy, though.
Yeah, exactly. Please tell us.
So, if Greece had a situation where this camaraderie, they were let down by the European Union because they didn't get the help, what happened in Italy was pretty much the opposite, as in where we had Europe overstepping into a local government, a European country. So this comes in the context of, well, similar years. So it was around 2011. We had Prime Minister Berlusconi, which obviously was a big maverick, big mogul, and had a big cult of personality. He was causing issues within the European Parliament because this was during the height where Europe was probably the most united. But then you had people such as Berlusconi, who was very friends with Gaddafi, very friends with Vladimir Putin, and he was trying to be the cushion that, well, he would say he was being a great diplomat. But really what was happening is that whilst the EU was trying to give very strong positions against Russia or the North African countries, Silvio Berlusconi would then open the back door and says, "Come on, Putin, let's have a chat during a bunga bunga." And together with that, of course, there was a heavy economic situation. Italy was, well, it was the second country to declare bankruptcy after Greece, after the 2008 crisis.
Wait, but did they actually declare it?
Yeah, they did. It was during Berlusconi's last days.
Oh wow! But hold on, their bankruptcy, I think it wasn't as loud and as tragic as Greek one, isn't it?
No, I think they kept it quiet, especially after they saw what happened to Greece. Kind of left alone.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as Berlusconi was causing issues within Europe, he, again, just to reiterate what we were saying earlier, this is how I'm going to present now how this was viewed rather than what actually happened. And it's clear to make this distinction. So basically something happened in the EU Parliament that made Berlusconi resign. And as Italy is a parliamentary republic with a president, how it works is that it's the president that appoints a prime minister to create a government. And what happened there in 2011 was that President Napolitano appointed not a politician, but a banker and professor to lead the Italian government. And who was this person? He was a European commissioner. He was very close to Europe, and how it was viewed at the time is that Europe has overstepped. They have not only make an elected politician by the people of Italy resign, but appointed someone who isn't even, well, he was Italian, but he was very European person, wasn't an elected official, he never stood for election, and was only put there to sort the things out. So this created a big backlash against Europe because it was a big overstep. That's how it was viewed. And he was there for 2 years, this Prime Minister Monti, his name was. And similar thing happened even in 2021 for the post-pandemic recovery, where Mario Draghi, also known internationally as Super Mario, he was appointed. He was the president of the European Central Bank, so like top guy in Europe, to lead the Italian government. Again, great skepticism against this. Why has Europe done this again to us? And what happened after Mario Draghi? You had a very far-right government being elected. So this just shows you how this, the example of Greece and Italy, how we have this big institution, this alliance, which is meant to be like it's meant to be like this international organization, like this globalist movement that slowly chips away from its reputation from the people, until we have this big skepticism and and malcontent, creating these reactionary movements such as the far right.
Well, yeah. I just want to point out how brilliantly diplomatic you were saying. Oh, it's not what actually happened. This is that has been viewed, and just to point out, we are trying to be apolitical. So we are showing you facts as they've been viewed, and we are presenting particular point of view on today's topic. But the truth, I would say, is somewhere in between, isn't it?
It is.
Because on one hand, you cannot say that he wasn't connected to you.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, that's conspiracy theory that he's like you can call it conspiracy theory for, like what you just said, that they've been elected as a tool.
Yeah. I mean, also because if we were to go in the actual detail, so if people viewed these two moves, these two prime ministers, as anti-democratic, however, in theory, as the president has been elected democratically, and his job is to appoint a prime minister, in theory, his choice was democratic. In theory.
Okay, so right now what we discussed is that the distrust to European Union started because of lack of financial help. Pretty much financial crisis also caused by the euro, which has been heavily recommended, I would say lightly. But then also the how EU tried to intervene with the internal policy of the countries. And right now, just also explaining one very big factor of how we get here, because this is still this stage, I wanted to bring another topic, which is right now way harder than economic, involvement of EU in internal country policies, which is immigration.
Yeah,
and then finally there is a massive kind of opinion, especially among people who are not interested in politics more than 5 minutes, watch once a week, is that the only countries which are benefiting and the only countries which are actually ruling European Union is France and Germany. And I just want to start with the sort of example of how, allowing EU to be involved in internal politics actually backfired at France. Because what we're seeing here is France is one of the countries which is taking the most immigrants out of all in Europe. I think they're, together with Italy, they're pretty much leading on it. And just to let you know, guys, about the numbers, UK on last Sunday, had the day with the most immigrants accepted on one day, and this number was nearly 900 people. And it's nowhere close to what France, Italy, or Greece is accepting every day. So, we're talking about thousands of people per day. So really high numbers. And then what they, of course, on one hand, that was the aftermath of the policy which they had in place for the decades before that started happening, which is, being colonial empire. So they decided, okay, so right now, because Europe is aging, what we're going to give free passport and benefits to people who are coming from our from our colonies and from mainly Africa in general. And what we're going to do, we will just accept them because that's the EU policy. So their assumption was, okay, so we're going to get them. They're going to assimilate very quickly. They're going to start working. They're going to have French passports. Just even though the Europe is aging, we just have this new wave of people coming in, working for the country's economies, improving countries' economies, and refreshing the population of continent looking forward. What actually happened is that they were assuming that the people who are coming to the immigrants, people who are coming through the water or whatever to stay in France, they're gonna assimilate within one generation. It absolutely didn't happen.
No.
They assumed that they're gonna be working and they're gonna be working for economy, but they sort of didn't create the really conditions for it, because they instead of giving them education, they gave them a lot of benefits for free, allocating all of them in the same suburbs, making it's very hard to assimilate, especially you're common, you don't know the language. Then even though you're second generation of these people, you're still been growing up in these blocks on the suburbs of town. You are perceived by media as people who are guests, even though you've been born there. We have to also remember that unlike what you see right now, and especially in the big cities, racism about people on many different areas was very much visible and feelable. And then on top of that, you are giving benefits for having more kids. So we are having the not 2+1 family growing up kids with this sort of problems. We have an average ratio of 4-5 kids per family, right? Because that makes sense. If you have more kids, we have more money, and because of that, the community of not assimilated people is also growing with every year. Now, when they are checking the birth rate, how they are measuring nowadays is they are one of the ways is they are checking by their name. What are the names which are being given for the new birds every time, and Arabic Islamic names are an overwhelming majority. Also, most of these people, even though we are seeing that Christianity and Catholicism, if we are talking about the France in particular, is experiencing massive drop, while Islamic religion is actually going through its renaissance, and it's coming, and it's happening in France, for example. So right now, what we are seeing is misjudgment and mismanagement of the immigration happening in Europe.
Yeah.
Do you think that happened everywhere? Because France is case study here, but I'm pretty sure it happened everywhere around it as well.
Just want to add something about France, because during those 2010s period, one of the problems why immigrants were not able to assimilate is because they kept seeing that maybe the French people didn't want them to assimilate. If you remember the 2010s, you had several terrorist attacks, such as, famously the Charlie Hebdo incident, which was a terrible tragedy. But also, so there was a big anti-Islamic reaction coming from those terrorist attacks. But also, if you remember, France is one of the few countries that does not allow the hijab on Muslim women, which is obviously a very targeted anti-Muslim bill. Now, they say it was secular thing, so it's anti-religion in general, but head coverings are usually worn by Muslim women. So that was one of the big issues for immigrants that basically didn't feel welcome there. So it was much more difficult to assimilate. However, if you look at what happened next door, so in Germany, they had a very different kind of policy there. So this was during Angela Merkel's tenure, and she had this very famous phrase that she used whilst describing her immigration policy, which, and excuse my German, but she said, "Wir schaffen das," which has different translations. If you're feeling positive about it, it is, "we can do this." If you're feeling a bit more pessimistic, it translates to, "we can manage this," as in...
Well, I just want to say nothing wrong about the German language, but it's hard to hear things positive in this language. Everything is very, very harsh. But obviously, it's nothing personal. That's a little joke. Yeah, but continue.
So "we can manage this" was basically her way of saying, let's bring them in. We can handle all this big wave of immigration. We can do this. We can handle this. And her policy within Germany was to basically get them in and spread them across all the counties. Germany is a federal states, so it's got different counties. So we'll get them in, and then we'll kind of split them equally. But some of these countries were in Eastern Germany, which maybe were a bit more rural, but also due to its history of Eastern Europe, there was a lot of housing development, which meant that there were more houses for these immigrants. However, I know we're looking at roots of populism, but a bit of spoiler here. Fast forward a few years to this year, and Eastern Germany is starting to see a rise of fascist politicians. We can say Nazis, it was a court case, but fascist we are allowed to say.
Again, very diplomatic.
Thank you. But what she wanted to do, she wanted to take Germany as a template to basically apply it to the whole of Europe. So let's get immigrants in, then we'll just spread them out throughout all the countries. Which, when it came to countries such as, when it came to immigration, that was seen a little bit as an open door policy. During the 2010s, there was a lot of displacement, whether it came from the Arab Spring, whether it came from Syria or other war-torn countries, where they basically could not live where they were from, whether it was for security, whether their houses were bombarded, they had to move. And there were several routes that could be taken to come into Europe. There was one that came from Turkey, so coming from Middle East through Turkey into Europe. Turkey actually did have a bit of a policy of allowing migrants to travel through Turkey as long as it kept going after the border. Another route that could be taken was through the sea, so through Crete and then Greece, or in Italy, through Italy, so Lampedusa, Sicily, and then make your way up into Northern Europe.
I love Lampedusa.
Yeah, no, it's great this time of year. But there was this very famous incident where there was a big caravan of people. So we're talking about 10,000 migrants who did the Turkey route. So they went through Istanbul and traveled into Eastern Europe to eventually get to Central Europe. However, when they reached Hungary, these 10,000 people, Hungary basically said, "We don't want you. You're not coming through us."
Well, why it's not surprising me that
No.
Hungary said such a thing.
It's a very liberal country.
It's a very liberal country, yeah. Yeah, okay.
So what in practice happened is that the migrants went to this train station, ready to jump on these trains to then basically scatter through Europe. Hungary created this military barricade at the train station. So the migrants literally had nowhere to go. They couldn't go back because that's where they came from, and they couldn't go forwards, and they couldn't stay there. So what Angela Merkel did, which became controversial, is that she personally sent a train from Berlin to Hungary, pick up these migrants, and send them back to Berlin. Now, this was viewed from immigrants saying, yes, we can go to Germany now. She accepted 10,000, means that, we can go there too.
Yeah.
The reaction was, though, okay, now we've got open borders, though. We can't take any more. Why are we taking all these immigrants? Where are they going to go? They're stealing our jobs, blah, 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 blah. And that created a lot of distrust against not only the government, not only EU, but also towards people from different countries. Well, let me clarify. Different skin colors.
Fair enough.
So yeah, and of course in Europe, as she wanted to apply her policies to all of Europe, there was a lot of malcontent and skepticism and an anti-immigration feeling.
Well, fair enough. So we can see on this example that even those countries which are widely considered as ruling the EU, they also experienced it the hard way, and it backfired at them at the same time. It's quite shocking. But so if we know the motives, if we know the financial lack of support, we know the involvement in local policies, and we know the immigration problem and not handling this very well, because that can be a challenge. That doesn't have to be a problem if it's managed well. I'm not saying that it's easy. That's why I'm not prime minister. That's the only reason. But it's it can be done better than this way.
Absolutely, yeah. So if we've now seen sort of the roots of how this far-right movements have been brewing, let's have a look at what's been happening. So I like to think one of the most important years in politics for me was 2016. Because 2016 saw two very important votes that kind of shook the whole system. This skepticism against institutions created this sort of reactionary movement that, if anything, these people basically wanted a shake up of the system. And the two ways it translated this was Brexit, and across the continent, even though it was in Europe, but it highly affects it, is the 2016 election that saw Trump being elected. Now, if we want to focus a little bit on Brexit, that came through all these sentiments that people were having, immigration being a big one, even though, as we discussed earlier, immigration numbers in the UK are not even as close as we're seeing in Italy, Greece, or France. But it created this rhetoric which was interesting. For example, we had the likes of Nigel Farage, leader of the UKIP party, and, well, Today Reform, where he used to have these posters which showed, again, that big caravan of people, crowds and crowds of immigrants walking, and with the big sign saying, Europe has an open border policy, we don't want this. But of course, when we look at the poster and the skin color of these people, they weren't coming from Italy, they weren't coming from France or Sweden. These were immigrants. I think that picture was actually taken in Turkey. So there was a bit of diversion this direction there. But even that whole idea of being against institutions, we're not only talking about Europe, we're talking about WHO, we're talking about academics. And there was this great phrase, I say great, said by Michael Gove, which encapsulated a moment, a bit the zeitgeist of what people were feeling, which was when asked, he was asked, all these experts are saying, if we get out of the EU, there's going to be a lot of financial problems, pound is going to drop. What's your reaction to this? And he replied, I think what you'll see is that we are all tired of experts, which is, it's very telling. Like, we should listen to the experts, not to Dave from Bournemouth on his Facebook comment.
Yeah. Well, you see, this is I think the Brexit was in my opinion, was very big hit, because it wasn't a random economy. It wasn't just with all due respect, it wasn't Malta or Czech Republic. Well, I love Czech beer and I love weather in Malta. Don't
shit on Czech Republic.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is their economy is not as big and in a perspective of the whole Europe as the European one, as the British one. So I think the fact that this happened also showed that no matter how big player you are, you can get out of there. And I just want to say that the British government was saying we are giving this referendum because they are trying to work. They try to influence our internal politics, and that was again as like in an aspect of immigration. So it's a blend of those two things we explained before. Yeah. Of course, there were many other reasons, but this is one of those. Now, I wanted to also say that I accept Brexit and as you said, the elections in US, which are, don't get me wrong, in my opinion, elections in US are important also because even though it's not Europe, it doesn't matter if it's Germany, France, or any other country, we're all in the area and the circle of influence of US. And there is no doubt about that. Because if you think about the influences which you have around the world, you have US, you have China, Asia in general, because you have the other countries that are also massive, and Russia potentially. Right now, this landscape is changing a little bit, but we are in America, the Western world. America is a leading country. It's the strongest country still in the world, but especially if we're gonna take under consideration something considered Western world. So I think if there is a guy who is who has many different proceedings in court, and he's basically he's famous from firing people live on TV. I mean, like, come on! It means that every extremist politician in Europe thinking, okay, so there is also a way for me, even though I'm saying things which are unacceptable, or unacceptable. It's again matter of opinion, and I'm trying to bite my tongue here, but it's like it's something which we would never think would get support, and suddenly look what is happening in East Germany right now, or what happened in Austria last Sunday. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look at last BJ on Monday.
They won't catch up.
But I just want to say that also what we are seeing right now is the kind of renaissance of Viseguard group.
Viseguard?
Viseguard. Viseguard. I don't know how to. I know.
You're the Eastern European. You should know that.
Well, look, I can say it in Polish, and I can promise you it's going to be perfect pronunciation, but in English is a bit different. So, but anyway, this is the union of Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland, and I just want to say that it has been invented in 1991. Okay, and we have to. All of these countries have been accepted by EU in 2004. So we're talking 13 years. Okay, so let's analyze how it changed. They created that group because the Berlin Wall fall in 1989. Then it fall in 1981. 1989. Then because of the changes and everything, the 1991 was pretty much the very first proper year when the changes started to being implemented, right? Because 1990 there were still some negotiations. None of these countries were actually became independent on the same day, right? So 1991 is the very first year when there is like new governments. We are setting up the new constitutions sometimes, or implementing new rules, and everything what we know right now in the Western world as normal, So, and they created that union because they just wanted to hold on till they're going to be accepted to EU. Not even that. I think at that time they didn't even dream about being accepted in EU, but they wanted to have the trading routes together. They wanted to support each other in case of, having a danger coming from Russia, because no one really knew. I just want to say that in 1989, 2 weeks before the Berlin Wall fall, no one really thought that it's ever going to end. And speak with people. I actually know that when I'm talking to my parents or my grandparents, no one really think that it's going to end. There was no, there wasn't like soft transition period. So they did that, hoping that one day they're going to get to you. They've been accepted to you in 2004. Right now, what is happening, and I would say it's happening from around 2011, 2012, they are talking about this group in respect of this is our union against you. So from being really hopeful that they're going to become a part of this organization, they're right now hoping that if that's going to happen, and it's not completely not realistic that they're going to accept that they're going to exit EU. This is their new union, and that's how they are also negotiating with EU at the moment. Of course, you have countries like Hungary, which are playing in many teams, and they are also, Orban is talking with Putin, and then he is, he's not as unified with his fellows from this group as everyone was expecting from him maybe a few years ago. But the thing is, like, you're gonna have more and more formations like that happening if the euro-skepticism gonna grow. And then right now we have Austria, which went far right, and then we have probably Czech Republic in next year when they're not probably, because I don't want to be a prophet or support any formation in Czech Republic, but there is a very fair chance that the far right wing will win this election, or at least going to be very high and going to have something to say when it's going to come to push the legislations. So this is what it is. This is what happened.
Just wanted to add something there. So what we've discussed in this section is more the normalization of these right-wing movements. So whilst we had in the early part of the 2010s, we did have the sentiment in the back of people's heads of this anti-immigration, anti-globalization movements. What we've been seeing with Brexit, the Viseguard group, Trump, is those sentiments actualizing. So people during these elections finally saw someone who spoke his mind, had that sense of machismo, they would call, the testosterone heavy, let me sort it out, I don't care about being cancelled, if we want to use today's words, or I'll say what I want, deal with it. Grab him by the pussy, immigrants are racist, drug smugglers, we don't want, Bruxelles, go home. One of my favorites is Giorgia Meloni from Italy, who one of her things that she says is, listen, with all due respect, I don't give a fuck, which is great.
Well, at least they speak their minds.
Yeah. And also
a way forward.
And also, if you remember the context of the beginning of the second half of the 2010s, you started having those movements where you had, for example, Me Too, where the reaction for those macho guys who want to regain their masculinity, they were talking about like Men Too. There was a big rise. The 2010s saw a lot of countries legalizing gay marriage, for example. The reaction being lots of people being anti-gay, or the Christianity or Catholicism, Christianity more than Catholicism, Christianity having that rise again, saying, well, if we want to believe in truth and original and traditional values, we need to be Catholic, and everything that goes against it is wrong. So all these sentiments are actualizing, they're becoming normalized, and that's why we start to see more and more of these politicians, such as Orban, Meloni, I would argue a bit Boris Johnson as well. Seeing these people behaving like they do, that made people, normal people, civilians, if we will, have these sentiments emerge a bit in their day-to-day life. Like, it is okay to say, build the wall, or immigrants are racist, because Trump said it, because Boris said it. And maybe have a little bit of that racism pop out again. That's why, for example, at the beginning of this year, 2024, we had all those riots, those far-right riots in the UK, following the stabbing of that girl in Southend by a guy who was dark-skinned, but from, was he Devon?
Yeah,
he was English.
And he was from Catholic Christian family.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that, what's been happening since these sentiments. But maybe this is a time where we can look at the future. Where are we going with this?
Yeah, so just to quickly summarize this last bit. So we are saying, so what happened is one of the biggest economies in Europe leaving, which was Brexit, formation of groups which were really, which are built on euro-skepticism, and there are not just few loud people in Euro Parliament. We're talking about the whole countries and their governments and the formations which are winning in their elections. And you're also talking about the normalization, global normalization of far right and kind of macho-ish politicians being in power, and then in power in the most significant countries, most influential countries in the world. Now, speaking about the future, I just want to say I know that you want to be positive.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say that, okay, there might be some positive elements to it, but in general, if the Euroscepticism, I'm just going to be saying what will happen if the Euroscepticism, like what Eurosceptics would say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would start with the fact that for all of us, European Union is the organization which we are living in for most of our lives. For instance, for me, for you, when Poland joined EU, I've been 10 years old. When you were born, Italy were already in EU for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
UK was in EU for the majority of time, and then I just want to say that it's false to think that because of that it's gonna last forever.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because this is not this is not kind of mandatory that if you're gonna call organization like this, it's gonna last, and we see that in a history. We have, for instance, League of Nations, to not look anywhere further, which was similar organization, of course, totally different times, okay, and many people would point the differences, but what I'm saying is the concept was also about unifying this, countries in Europe. It didn't really work, and it lasts a very long time. It lasts tens of years, you know. So what I'm saying is, when Europe is becoming less, when Europe is becoming less unified, it's becoming weaker. Of course, I just want to revert to what I said at the beginning of this paragraph. Eurosceptics would say that that's going to make Europe stronger, but actually, European countries are way smaller than countries of South America or in Asia. And then what you're facing is that each economy of Europe separately is not very valuable business partner to either international trade between the countries, but also even to private but huge companies. So that's why the countries which this Euroscepticism is growing at a similar scale, like from this Viseguard group or whatever, however you pronounce it, they are unifying in this group, and they are talking about that because they know that being separated, they're not going to be very valuable in the market. And I think that's also going to be happening in the whole Europe as a continent. Because let's not lie each other, economically and about the the new technologies and inventions and stuff, if you're going to look at the amount of publications, science publications, which are released by American citizens, South Asian citizens, or European citizens, Europe is at the very end, so just the value of either singular countries or Europe in general will be going down and down.
Yes, well, just to respond to that. So, as we've been talking about, Europe is an alliance. It's an alliance that is cultural, economical, societal, and with shared values. And when it comes to Europe, we are stronger together. So just in response to you mentioning about investment and smaller countries not receiving those, investments by big companies, private companies. At the moment, the EU is having all these measures to tackle the issues with AI and the internet and technology. And what loads of people have been saying is, what you're going to do now is just deter big companies such as Amazon, Facebook, Meta or Tesla to not come to the EU. However, these policies only work if Europe is united, if all the countries decide that these measures need to be taken. So if at the moment we have all these movements and politicians that are anti-EU, the reputation and scale of the EU diminishes. If all these elected politicians, such as, in Italy we have Meloni, you've got Orban in Hungary, Austria now is going quite right wing. Germany might see a little tilt to the right. If all these politicians get elected and gain more reputation, then they have validation to go further to the right. So if you look at Meloni was very anti-EU, very anti-immigration, but once got into power, took a more centrist stance because she didn't have the support. If she does gain that support, then the dial does go to the right, and the EU might break off further and have less reputation. And I was trying to be the positive guy.
Yeah, I can see that positivity is going through. But hey, this is the real danger, and these are the real things which are happening. And I just want to say, because we're going to be slowly wrapping up, but I just want to say that the big risk we're facing as well is the aging Europe. Okay, because right now, as I said, we're not pioneering in anything in particular, but we still have over 500 million citizens as are considered widely as rich consumers. Okay, and that's why China is, they wanted to build the airports here, and they wanted to bring the goods here, and direct whatever gonna be the next factory of the world nowadays. They wanted to, still direct it at Europe because it's more Europeans than Americans.
Yeah,
and there are, or at least was less differences between the countries as it is between the states. Of course, that's changing right now a little bit, but we still have that opinion, right? But because the Europe is aging, if Europe will become not unified, it will be its only value which is gonna have left also gonna go down the toilet, and this is something which we are facing. James, do you want to say some words to wrap it up in like your conclusion, or you want to maybe add something to what I said at the end?
No, I mean, just to bring of positivity to this discussion. So one thing that people often say is that history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And what we see now is, it's a balancing act. So you had the 2010s, which was very liberal in Europe, and now we're seeing the 2020s as looking very right-wing. But it does seem to balance itself out in history. So hopefully in the future we will be seeing a return to more centrist or more liberal ideals. Also because, as we've been discussing, the reason why we did a more of a historical view on this topic is just to show, well, for me, it was to show that all these movements have been reactionary. Everything happened because of events, whether it was overstepping or understepping of the European Union, whether it was this great wave of immigration, whether it was the normalization of far-right movements. That means that it's all been reactionary, and if something's reactionary, it usually gets spent fairly quickly. Obviously, let's see how it goes. Maybe that's what they said in the 30s in Germany. But my positive view about this is that.
Yeah. So I just wanna my positivity is that we have a potential to grow back. It's not dystopian and post-apocalyptic scenario when there is very long way to come back. This is something to really within our reach. We just need to go, be conscious, and vote. Yeah. I would say, and this is my main thing. Let's just vote and be active and be conscious, and let's make decisions a little bit less hot-headed that a lot of politicians tend to do.
Yeah. And when it comes to voting, it's also being informed, because this is obviously something that we were not able to touch during this episode, but a lot that happened, especially in 2016, was due to the so-called fake news or misinformation or beyond the truth, if you want to use a word coined by Trump. So make sure that when you do your research, it's from valid sources. Check multiple sources to make sure that what you're reading is correct. And obviously make up your mind, vote, but please do.
Okay, I think we're gonna finish it.
Hey, well, how are we feeling? Are we feeling a bit more positive, a bit more negative about Europe?
We're feeling quite. I would say we're feeling quite mild, but hopeful.
Yes, I'm feeling diplomatic.
Diplomatic is a good word. Well, thank you so much for joining us at DJ at Brunch Deep Dive. Let us know how it sits and what other topics you want us to discuss. And James, thank you so much for today.
No, thank you. And just to our listeners, just want to remind you that if you're watching our premiere, you will notice that you can see our faces now. It's our first episode where you can judge if we're faces for radio or video. So let us know. We will be releasing this episode on radio only on Friday and on Catch Up on Sunday. And we will be having these episodes every week. So tune in. Thank you so much, Blaze.
Okay, thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.